She was exhausted, her hands blistered from endless hours at 3 different jobs. A divorced mom who carried the weight of survival on her shoulders. She worked while others slept, determined to keep food on the table and hope alive for her child. People whispered that she was wasting her life, that struggle was all she would ever know. But what no one expected was that her son, the boy who watched her sacrifice everything, would one day do something that shocked the entire world. Before we begin this powerful story of hardship, resilience, and the redemption of a family, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories will grip your heart and keep you watching until the very last second. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., long before the first light brushed the horizon. Maria groaned softly, dragging herself out of bed in the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her 12-year-old son, Daniel. She had gotten home less than 3 hours ago, her body aching from the graveyard shift at a cleaning company. But there was no time for rest. Her first job of the day awaited. She tiptoed across the room, careful not to wake Daniel, who was curled up under a thin blanket on the couch. Their apartment had no bedroom, just a converted living space with a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, and the couch that doubled as her son's bed. Maria paused for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His chest rose and fell gently, his lips murmuring something in a dream. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered before slipping quietly into her uniform. The diner smelled of frying bacon and burnt coffee, a mix that clung to Maria's hair and clothes. By 6 a.m., she was already on her feet, juggling plates for truckers and office workers rushing through their breakfasts. Her smile was polite but hollow. Each tip, quarters, crumpled dollar bills, was swept into her apron pocket with silent gratitude. By 11, her shift ended. She grabbed a day-old muffin from the kitchen, stuffing it into her bag for Daniel's after-school snack, then rushed to catch the bus to her second job. At the laundromat, the air was thick with detergent and humidity. She fed quarters into machines, wiped down counters, and folded mountains of strangers' clothes, her back screaming for relief. And still, there was no pause. At night, she put on her third uniform, janitor coveralls, and trudged through the dark halls of an office building downtown. The work was lonely, the fluorescent lights buzzing like wasps above her, but it paid just enough to cover rent, groceries, and Daniel's school supplies. The neighbors whispered. Some pitied her. Others mocked her exhaustion, calling her the woman who never stops scrubbing. But Maria ignored them. Every sore muscle, every sleepless night, every coin scraped together was for Daniel. He was the only thing that kept her standing. At school, Daniel was quiet, his clothes secondhand, his shoes worn. Teachers saw him as shy, maybe a little distant. What they didn't see was the fire inside him. The way he watched his mother with a mix of worry and awe. He noticed her swollen hands, the lines deepening on her face, the way she sometimes skipped dinner so he could eat. One evening, as Maria dragged herself home close to midnight, she found Daniel still awake at the table, hunched over a notebook. His pencil flew across the page, scribbling equations, sketches, words she didn't understand. "Daniel," she said gently, "you need to sleep." He looked up, his eyes bright despite the late hour. "I will, Mom. Just a little longer." He covered the notebook with his arm, almost protective. "I'm working on something." Maria frowned, curious, but she was too tired to press. She kissed his head, whispering, "Don't stay up too late," before collapsing onto her mattress. What Maria didn't know was that her son's notebook held more than schoolwork. It was filled with ideas, inventions, and bold visions of a future beyond the shackles of poverty. Daniel wasn't just dreaming, he was planning. And in the quiet hours when the world slept and his mother sacrificed everything to keep him afloat, Daniel was building something no one saw coming. Something that would change both of their lives and shock the entire world. The week blurred into a carousel of alarms and uniforms. Maria's body moved on muscle memory. Pour coffee, bus tables, catch the 11:22, fold shirts warm from the dryer, count quarters with raw fingers, swipe badge at the office tower, mop until the hallways shone. She measured time not by hours but by aches, shoulders at noon, feet by 3, lower back by midnight. When she finally keyed open the apartment door, Dawn was already thinking about the horizon. Daniel met her with a glass of water and that same notebook, edges frayed from being opened and closed 100 times. "You should sleep," he said, and she smiled at the way he echoed her. "I will," she murmured, brushing his hair back. "What are you working on, meu amor?" He hesitated, then flipped the notebook just enough for her to see a page. Neat sketches of a small device, arrows labeling parts, motor, sensor array, carbon filter. Next to it, equations hunched like tired birds. "Just ideas," he said. "Nothing real yet." She wanted to ask more, but gravity dragged at her eyelids. "One day," she whispered, half asleep already, "one of your ideas will pay our rent." She meant it as a joke. He didn't laugh. At school, Daniel kept his head down, but not his mind. He haunted the library, checked out books the size of bricks, and sat in the back of science class answering questions under his breath. Ms. Patel, the science teacher with coffee breath and kind eyes, started to notice. When she handed back the unit test, one read 100 at the top, she lingered beside his desk. "You finished the extra credit section," she said softly, "and you corrected one of the textbook's sample solutions." He looked startled. "Was I not supposed to?" "You were right," she replied, a smile tugging at her mouth. "Have you ever been to the makerspace on 14th? They let students use the 3D printer if they bring their own filament." The word 3D printer lit something inside him. "I don't have filament," he said, then added quickly, "but maybe I could save." "Talk to Mr. Alvarez after school," she said, lowering her voice. "Tell him I sent you." That evening, Maria's second job ran long. A dryer belt snapped, and she stayed to hand-fold a mountain of towels to make up time. She texted Daniel, "Eat the pasta. I'll be late." He sent back a photo of an empty plate and a thumbs-up emoji he almost never used. She smiled at the screen, tucked it into her pocket, and kept folding. Daniel didn't go home. He took the bus to 14th, found the makerspace door tucked between a pawn shop and a music studio, and stared for a full minute before going in. The room smelled like sawdust and hot plastic. Lathes hummed. A laser cutter etched tiny galaxies into acrylic. Mr. Alvarez, bearded and impossibly patient, glanced up from calibrating a machine. "Ms. Patel sent me," Daniel said, words tumbling. I have an idea." "Show me." Daniel unfolded his notebook. He spoke quickly at first, then slower as confidence found him. A palm-sized device built from scavenged parts that could test water quality in real time, then send the data to a simple app he was coding on his mom's used phone. An open-source design cheap enough for any neighborhood to build. A map that could show which blocks had safe taps, so kids didn't get sick and moms didn't have to boil water after a 14-hour shift. Alvarez didn't interrupt. When Daniel finished, breathless, Alvarez said only, "What do you need?" "Scrap, a motor, sensor components if I can find them, and time." "Scrap is over there," Alvarez said, pointing to bins labeled with marker. "The rest we'll figure out. You can earn lab time by cleaning, helping others. Deal?" Daniel's yes came out as a grin. He fell into a new rhythm. School, makerspace, home. When Maria was at the diner, he coded. When she was at the laundromat, he soldered. When she was mopping offices, he tested his prototype in the bathtub. He learned to live inside the in-between, between bus stops, between bites of reheated pasta, between the fear of failure and the need to try. One night, as rain freckled the window, he found Maria at the table massaging her wrists. He placed the device in front of her. It looked humble, 3D printed shell, a salvaged LED that blinked green, wires he'd braided to keep neat. "What is it?" she asked, brow furrowing. "Something that tells the truth," he said. He dipped the probe into a glass of tap water. The LED pulsed, then a bar on his cracked phone screen climbed to green. "Safe. If it turns yellow or red, we'd know before anyone got sick." Her hand flew to her mouth. For a second she looked as if she might cry. Instead she laughed, incredulous and soft. "Meu Deus, Daniel. There's an online competition," he rushed on, as if the courage would evaporate if he didn't use it. "Global Young Innovators. If I submit the design and it's selected, they'll send real sensors and give us a small grant to scale a pilot. Applications close Friday. Maria's eyes flicked to the calendar, to the cluster of shifts circled in blue pen. Friday, she repeated. Can you finish? If I work tonight and tomorrow. He swallowed. I'll need your phone to hotspot. Ours is too slow. Take it, she said without hesitation, pushing her battered phone across the table. Take anything you need. I'll borrow a clock from the diner. He worked until the apartment's thin walls blurred into shadow. At dawn, he uploaded his entry with shaking fingers. Schematics, code, a 2-minute video filmed on a stack of cookbooks. He hit submit and felt both emptied and complete. Maria left for the diner, kissed his hair on the way out, and whispered, I am proud of you, no matter what. He slept for 1 hour, then 2. When he woke, the room was silver with morning. His phone buzzed. Once, twice, a third time insistent. He rolled over, thumbed the screen, and froze. An email subject line glowed at the top, the sender's domain unfamiliar and official. Urgent. Your submission has been selected. Media interview request. His heart slammed once, hard enough to hurt. Daniel stared at the email, blinking as if the words might rearrange themselves into something ordinary. Your submission has been selected. Media interview request. He rubbed his eyes, sat up straighter, read it again. It was real. He leapt from the couch, clutching the phone like a fragile treasure. By the time Maria returned from the diner, her apron still smelling of bacon grease and coffee, Daniel was pacing the small apartment. Mom, he blurted before she'd even set down her bag. They picked me. Out of thousands. They want me to do an interview. Maria froze, exhaustion falling from her face like a mask. An interview? Daniel thrust the phone into her hands. She scrolled, lips parting as she read. Oh, meu Deus. She looked at him, eyes shining with both pride and worry. This is real. They're asking if I can be ready tomorrow. Tomorrow. Maria sank into a chair, the phone trembling between her fingers. Daniel, this is huge. Bigger than I ever dreamed. But interviews mean attention. Cameras. People knowing who you are, where you live. She glanced at the peeling walls, the thin curtains that did nothing to keep the world out. Are we ready for that? By afternoon, a local news van parked on their street. Neighbors gathered, murmuring, craning necks. Maria felt their eyes, some full of envy, others of genuine curiosity. She tried to hold her head high, but her chest knotted with nerves. Inside, the reporter set up lights that turned the dingy apartment into a stage. Daniel sat at the table, his invention before him, wires neatly tucked, the LED pulsing green as if to prove its worth. Daniel, the reporter began, smile practiced but warm. Tell us how this works. His hands trembled at first, but as he explained the sensors, the code, the dream of mapping safe water for families like his voice steadied. The words flowed. By the time the interview ended, the reporter's smile was no longer just for the camera. This is remarkable, she said softly, packing up. The world needs to hear this. That night, the segment aired. Maria and Daniel sat huddled on the couch, the flickering TV filling their small living room. They watched his face appear on screen, watched neighbors' heads turn through apartment windows, watched the world notice what had once been scribbles in a secret notebook. The phone rang. A teacher, then another, then a call from a university lab across the state. Offers of mentorship, invitations to visit, questions about whether Daniel had considered filing a patent. Maria's heart soared and sank all at once. This is too fast, she whispered, clutching the phone. Daniel, however, glowed. For the first time in his young life, he wasn't invisible. The next morning, Maria's ex-husband appeared at the diner where she worked, sliding into a booth with the same smugness that had crushed her in court years earlier. Quite the prodigy you've got there, he said as she poured coffee, his voice dripping with false charm. Looks like the boy takes after me. Maria's hands stiffened. Daniel takes after no one but himself. He smirked. If he's about to be famous, maybe it's time I stepped back in. Courts love a success story. A hardworking father guiding his genius son. She slammed the coffee pot down harder than she meant to. You lost the right to guide anything when you left us. But his grin only widened. We'll see. That evening, as Maria told Daniel about the encounter, his phone buzzed again. Another email, but this one not from a local station. The subject line read, Invitation to the Global Young Innovators Summit, Geneva. Maria's breath caught. Daniel's hands shook. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was the world. And both of them knew. Stepping into that light would bring opportunities beyond imagination, and dangers they weren't prepared for. The invitation email glowed on Daniel's cracked phone screen, its words both dazzling and terrifying. Global Young Innovators Summit, Geneva, Switzerland. All expenses paid. A chance to present his invention on a stage broadcast worldwide. Daniel looked at Maria, his eyes alight. Mom, Geneva. This is everything. Maria's stomach tightened. Geneva was oceans away, far beyond the safety of their small, battered apartment. She imagined Daniel in a suit on a stage, cameras flashing, and then she imagined lawyers, her ex-husband, strangers who saw dollar signs where she saw her son. Daniel, she said softly, this isn't just a science fair. It's the world watching. Are you ready for that? He hesitated, but the fire in his gaze didn't dim. I have to be. You've given everything for me. If this can change things, for us, for others, I can't say no. 2 weeks later, their lives were unrecognizable. Passports were rushed through. A sponsorship covered Daniel's travel, but Maria worked double shifts to afford her own ticket. She would not let him go alone. Reporters camped outside their building. Neighbors who once whispered pity now knocked on her door, offering congratulations with rehearsed smiles. Even at the laundromat, strangers whispered, That's her. The boy genius's mom. Maria kept her head down, folding sheets with hands that shook. At night, though she lay awake, fears churning, she remembered her ex-husband's smirk at the diner, his words, Maybe it's time I stepped back in. She knew the man well enough to see the storm coming. Her dread proved right. Days before the flight, a letter arrived, formal, stamped with legal insignia. Her ex-husband had filed for custody. His claim, Maria's unstable lifestyle and excessive work hours made her unfit. Daniel's new opportunities, he argued, required a parent capable of guiding his career. Maria's hands trembled as she read. Every word cut deep. She could almost hear his voice mocking her exhaustion. Her 3 jobs, her calloused hands. Daniel found her at the table, the letter crumpled in her fist. What is it? She tried to hide it, but he pulled it free, scanning quickly. His face hardened. He's not doing this. He can't. Maria forced back tears. Daniel, if a judge listens. He won't win, Daniel said fiercely. You're the reason I even have this chance. I'll tell them. Everyone will know the truth. On the day of their flight, Maria's ex appeared at the airport, flanked by a lawyer. He blocked their path at the gate. Daniel belongs with me, he declared, loud enough for cameras to capture. You'll ruin his future. The crowd turned. Maria's face burned, fear clashing with fury. Before she could answer, Daniel stepped forward. No, he said, his voice steady though his hands shook. She's the only reason I'm here. She worked 3 jobs so I could dream. She never gave up on me. She's my future. Gasps rippled through the bystanders. A reporter snapped photos. The lawyer stammered, retreating under the weight of Daniel's words. Maria's ex glared, but for once his smirk faltered. Hours later, the plane lifted off, city lights shrinking below. Daniel pressed his forehead to the window, eyes wide with wonder. Maria sat beside him, clutching his hand, her heart a storm of pride and terror. Mom, Daniel whispered. Whatever happens there, I'm doing this for you. She kissed his temple, tears pricking her eyes. And I'll be right beside you. But as clouds swallowed the view, Maria knew the battle wasn't over. Geneva promised opportunity but also exposure. The world would see her son, and so would those who would stop at nothing to claim him. The conference hall in Geneva shimmered with glass and steel, banners hanging from vaulted ceilings. Global Young Innovators Summit. Bright lights reflected off polished floors, cameras lined the aisles, and voices in a dozen languages buzzed in the air. Daniel clutched his notebook like armor, his invention nestled in a padded case. He had never been so far from home, never felt so small. And yet, as he looked at the rows of brilliant young minds from across the globe, something inside him stirred. He belonged here. Maria walked beside him, her thrift store blazer pressed as best as she could manage. She scanned the crowd nervously, every flash of a camera reminding her of the custody letter back home. Every handshake felt like a test. But when she looked at her son, chin lifted, eyes burning with purpose, she straightened her shoulders. "You've got this," she whispered. Backstage, Daniel adjusted wires and recalibrated sensors with steady hands, though his stomach nodded. Other contestants whispered, some friendly, others dismissive. A boy from Germany smirked at his second-hand tools. "That's your project? Cute." Daniel bit his lip but said nothing. Maria's voice echoed in his head. "We don't bow to mockery." When his turn came, the announcer's voice boomed. From the United States, Daniel Reyes. He stepped into the spotlight. The crowd blurred into shadow, the stage blinding. His palms slick, he placed the device on the podium and began. He spoke of his mother, working 3 jobs, sacrificing sleep so he could study. He spoke of neighborhoods where tap water carried danger, where families boiled every drop. And he showed how his device could test water instantly, mapping safety for entire communities with nothing more than a phone. The LED blinked green on cue, the apps bar climbing, the crowd leaning forward. His voice shook at first, but soon, it steadied. Passion filled every word. When he finished, silence hung, then thunderous applause broke out. Cameras flashed. Judges scribbled furiously. Maria watched from the wings, her heart bursting. She had scrubbed floors, folded laundry, mopped offices, all so her son could dream. And now the world was clapping for him. But amid the ovation, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Her stomach dropped. Mark, her ex-husband, sat in the audience, flanked by a man in a sleek suit. He had come all the way to Geneva. Maria's blood ran cold. She slipped toward him, her pulse racing. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. Mark's smirk was back. "Our son deserves proper representation. Imagine the endorsements, the patents, the money. With me guiding him, he'll have everything." Maria's fists clenched. "You mean you'll have everything? You abandoned him." "Courts forget," he said smoothly. "But the world loves a father-son story, especially one that sells." That night, in the hotel room, Daniel bounced with energy, replaying the cheers in his head. "Mom, did you see? They loved it." Maria forced a smile, but her mind was on Mark. Should she tell Daniel? Should she let his victory night stay untouched? Before she could decide, a knock rattled the door. She opened it to find a hotel staffer holding an envelope. Inside, typed in bold, "Custody hearing moved up. Emergency session. Tomorrow." Maria's breath hitched. They were thousands of miles from home, and still Mark's reach followed. She sat heavily on the bed, staring at Daniel's hopeful eyes. How could she tell him that tomorrow, on the very day his invention could change the world, someone was trying to take him away? Morning light spilled into the hotel room, golden but heavy. Maria sat at the small desk, the custody notice clutched in her hands. Her stomach churned. Across the room, Daniel zipped his case, humming with nervous energy. He had no idea. "Mom," he said, grinning. "Today's the final presentation. If I win, they'll fund mass production. Imagine, kids everywhere safe from bad water." Her throat tightened. She wanted to protect his joy, but the truth clawed at her chest. She slid the paper across the desk. "Daniel, your father filed again. The court moved the hearing. It's today." His smile faltered. "Today? While I'm here?" She nodded, tears threatening. "He's trying to take you away from me, even now." Daniel's jaw set, sharper than she'd ever seen. He won't. Not if they hear the truth. The conference hall overflowed. Cameras flashed, judges whispered, and finalists waited with inventions gleaming under spotlights. Daniel stepped onto the stage again, the LED blinking steady in his hands. But this time, he wasn't just presenting a device. He was carrying his family's fight. He took a deep breath, scanning the audience, and saw Mark. The smirk, the suit, the silent claim, "He's mine." Daniel's voice rose. "This project began in a one-bedroom apartment where my mom worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. She is the reason I'm here. She is the reason I believe every problem has a solution. If you see anything in me worth celebrating today, know it comes from her sacrifice." Maria's breath caught. The judges leaned in. The audience hushed. Daniel held up the device. "This isn't just about water. It's about dignity. About children not being afraid of what comes out of their faucet. And about moms like mine, who give everything and deserve better." The applause came like thunder, rolling, unending. Reporters leapt to their feet. Cameras zoomed in on Maria, tears streaking her cheeks. An hour later, the verdict arrived. Daniel had won. His invention would be funded, distributed, protected by international patents under his name. He was no longer just a boy with a notebook. He was a world changer. Mark cornered Maria in the corridor, his smugness cracking. "Do you really think a judge will side with a janitor over me now?" Maria lifted her chin. "I think the world just saw who Daniel belongs to. And it's not you." Back home weeks later, the courthouse was packed. The custody case was swift. Clips of Daniel's speech played, his words about his mother echoing through the chamber. When the judge spoke, her voice was firm. "Custody remains with Maria Reyes. Petition denied." Maria exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Across the aisle, Mark's face twisted, defeated. She turned to Daniel, who gripped her hand tightly. "We did it, Mom," he whispered. "No," she said, smiling through tears. "You did it, and the world will never forget." Weeks later, their small apartment glowed with possibility. Daniel's invention was in pilot programs, universities calling, opportunities blooming. But for Maria, the victory wasn't money or recognition. It was knowing her son had not only survived hardship, he had transformed it into hope for millions. As she tucked him in one night, Daniel whispered, "One day, I'll make enough so you never have to work 3 jobs again." Maria kissed his forehead. "You already gave me everything I ever needed, Daniel." This story proves that injustice doesn't define us, resilience does. From a mother's sacrifice to a son's brilliance, they turned struggle into triumph. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. Because sometimes, the greatest inventions aren't built in labs, they're built in the heart of sacrifice and love.